Okay, guys, good evening and welcome to this journal club. And we are very happy to start this new series. And today we are going to have a very different topic, which is cervicogenic headache. And I chose this topic because there's a lot of research which should be done on this topic. And unfortunately, there is very little data. And just to show how little the data is, so we thought we will just start with this topic. So I'll be beginning my presentation. I was trying to just allow everyone in, and I hope now we all are here. So let me start the presentation now. Welcome to this presentation, and this is brought to you by Mumbai Pain School. We all know that pain medicine in the world is actually very diverse, and India is no exception, and it is having diverse issues. And as a result, there are various standards, and this leads to a lot of discrepancies and different learning requirements amongst the individual because of the different applications. And as a result, there are different offerings. So there is a 1-day fellowship and there is a 3-year DM. So this is the spectrum. And if somebody wants to learn, there's a lot of money and time involved. And since it's a super specialty, so definitely it's not easy for everyone to just try and find out time from their busy schedules. So to overcome these issues, Mumbai Pain School has partnered with Leicester Pain Education and Training, Leicester, United Kingdom. And this was a joint venture of, in fact, Leicester Pain Education and Penisha Spine Wellness and Pain Relief Center. And as a result, we have this in front of you now, and you have online learning, which is on demand, and basic course is free initially. And from 30th September, we are going to close the free registrations, and we have got around 250 people who have registered in the free course. And we'll have hands-on cadaveric workshops as and when time permits. We are fortunate to have expert faculty from all over the world, and it's said that the best teachers, they teach from the heart and not from the book. Uh, and we are fortunate to have many such faculties throughout the world. So now let's see what a journal club is. A brief introduction. So you know what's a club? So it's a gathering of people wherein they join together, do some fun activities, and this is what a journal club is also. It is also a club, but the only difference is we discuss journals. So we critically evaluate the recent academic literature, and we appraise the positive points. We point out the issues which are there with the journals, and then we study the methodology in detail, and then we find out how we can actually change or improve upon these studies which are already done. And it's important to note that the subject here is defined. Okay, so the subject, it is defined, and since there is only one theme, so the people can have a connect between the different papers, okay, or between the different topics which are presented. And everyone has different reactions and everyone has different opinions. And the reason we do a peer reviewed research is this only, that we get different opinions and different viewpoints, all available at for the benefit of the mankind. And therefore attendee participation here also is very important, because we need to accommodate all the different opinions and different viewpoints. So feel free to put your comments in chat box throughout the session, and we shall be happy to honor them. So how it started. So it started in the 18th or the mid 19th century. So it's Sir James Paget in the Bartholomew Hospital in the UK at London. This is the picture of the hospital at that time. So he started the first club, and for him it was just a gathering of people who used to gather for some tea or snacks and all that, and used to discuss the journals, and which were very expensive also. And the same thing started in 1875 in Montreal by Sir William Osler. And the main point here was that the journals were costly. And this is an 1875 picture which I am showing to you, and courtesy of Wikipedia. So we all know Harrison's principles of internal medicine, and the man who started it all, Tinsley Harrison. So he used to have meetings twice a month at his home, where they used to critically evaluate the papers. And the important thing here is time and discipline. And I think everyone will appreciate that. And healthy skepticism is most welcome, but it should be in a positive way, and we should not degrade the standards. So the healthy skepticism is also very important for improving the further research and literature, or praise can also be done. Okay, so I think we can now go on to today's topic. We have some young and dynamic budding pain physicians with us. And without wasting time, I will now request them to share the screen. So first, we will have Dr. Sanjog Mekewar. He is a DA-DNB and fellow in pain medicine from D.Y. Patil University. And he will discuss a couple of papers, and then we will go on to the next speaker. So I think welcome, Dr. Sanjog. You have already started screen sharing. We can see your yes, and you can begin now. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So I will start with the initial two papers, and which will be followed by next by two papers, which will be presented by Dr. Akhil. So my first paper is titled Ultrasound Guided versus Fluoroscopy Guided Deep Cervical Plexus Block for the Treatment of Cervicogenic Headache. So this is an original article which was published in Biomed Research International volume in 2017, and the authors included Quing Van et al. Now, the clinical question that this article asked was, can ultrasound be an effective alternative to fluoroscopy of patients of cervicogenic headache? Now, cervicogenic headache, as we know, has a prevalence of about 20% among the patients of chronic headache. So it generally has a prevalence of 1 to 4%, but in patients of chronic headache, the prevalence is about 20%. And the treatment strategies which are commonly applied for treatment of these patients includes medications, physical therapy, acupuncture, manipulations, transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, pulsed radiofrequency, injections, and surgeries. Now, C2, C3 facet joints and atlantoaxial joints are believed to be the primary causes of cervicogenic headache. Though there are multiple things that may be involved, which may be myofascial, or it can be the involvement of the upper cervical discs. But these two components are the most important ones. Now, ultrasound guided injections, they have been described recently in the literatures, and the absence of radiation exposure, equipment, affordability, and bedside settings are advantages of ultrasonography compared with the traditional radiological imaging. So previously, fluoroscopy guided methods were used for giving these injections, but with the use of ultrasound for even this injection can be very beneficial, and with some of the quoted advantages, and that is what the article wants to say. Now, the inclusion criteria, for the inclusion criteria, they have, so it is, okay. So the diagnostic criteria is for the inclusion criteria. They have used the diagnostic criteria given by Jasted et al., which included the patients with unilateral or bilateral pain starting in the neck and radiating to the frontotemporal region. pain which is aggravated by the neck movement, restricted cervical range of motion, joint tenderness in at least one of the joints of the upper cervical spine, that is C2, C3, headache frequency of at least 1 per week over a period greater than 3 months. Now, from these patients in this study, they chose only the patients who had unilateral pain. Now, the exclusion criteria included the patients with pathological fractures, with cancers, other diseases of the cervical vertebra, and headaches which may be caused by the nervous system diseases or other factors. Now, this study was a prospective randomized single blind study, and the interventions that were compared were the USG guided deep cervical plexus block and a fluoroscopy guided deep cervical plexus block. Now, after the procedure, the follow-ups were done at 2 weeks, 12 weeks, and 24 weeks. And the follow-ups were done by direct patient examination or through telephonic consultations. Now, the outcome assessment was done by determining the reduction in the numerical pain scores. So, where NPS from 0 is no pain and 10 is the worst pain. Now, in this study, 1 week following the first injection, the physician applied second block treatment in some of the patients, depending on the symptom of the patient. Which is the USG guided deep cervical plexus block. What they have described is that you have to, from the the patient is in the transverse plane, 6x13 frequency probe, and we have to identify the transverse process. Just below the transverse process will be the vertebral artery, medial to it will be the carotid artery, and we have to hit the transverse process and we have to give the drug here. And similarly, in fluoroscopy guided deep cervical plexus block, they have advised to give the injection at the lateral recess. Now, they have not elaborated in this article. They have not elaborated on how to go about it and how to guide the needle towards the determined points. Now, in statistics they have used, they compared the sex, age, and duration of pain were compared by the chi-square test and Mann-Whitney methods. And at each time point of injection, the NPS was compared by repeated measures, analysis of variance, and the Bonferroni correction was conducted for post-hoc comparison. Statistical analysis was carried out using SPSS software, and values were expressed as means plus or minus standard deviation, and p-value of less than 0.05 was considered as the statistically significant. So this was the contour diagram. So 84 patients were considered eligible, and the 24 were excluded depending on the inclusion and exclusion criteria. The 60 patients remaining were divided into two groups: ultrasound group 30 patients, fluoroscopy group 30 patients. Now, 2 weeks after the treatment, 30 patients, so 30 were continued in the US ultrasound group, while one of the patient withdrew. And after till 28 weeks, 24 weeks after treatment, out of 30, total 28 patients completed the study, while in the fluoroscopy group, out of 30, 26 completed the study. Okay. So in results, what was significant things that I'll tell you. In first thing that I noticed was that in both the groups, the female population was predominant compared to the males. So they were comparable in that sense. But if you take a study as a whole, so the females group were more than the male patients. Second thing was that the number of injections. The second, what we have said is some of the patients were given second block 1 week post the first block. So in the ultrasound group, 12 patients were given the second block, while in the fluoroscopy group, 13 patients were given the second block. And in the study, what they have mentioned is they used either the transverse process of C2 vertebra or the C3 vertebra. So what numbers they have given is in 20 patients in the US ultrasound group, they have given block at the C2 level, while in 8 they have given at the C3 level. In fluoroscopy, similarly, 21 patients they have given at the C2 level, and in 5 patients they have given at the C3 level. Now, this is the comparison of NRS before and after the treatment at baseline. In ultrasound group, the numerical ratings scale was average was 7.61, plus or minus 1.12. In fluoroscopy is what 7.50. So they were comparable. And after 2 weeks, 12 weeks, 24, we can see the reduction in the NRS in both the groups. Now, in the results, they have mentioned about some of the complications that they got in some of the patients. So, 3 patients in the ultrasound group felt dizzy immediately after injection, and the symptoms disappeared when they lay down on the bed for several minutes. A total of 4 patients, 2 complained of neck and shoulder uncomfortableness. None of the patients in the study had any treatment-related severe complications. So, in a discussion of this study, what they have given references of the studies was related to the comparing the efficacy of these methods. So they have not actually compared the ultrasound. These previous studies were not comparing the ultrasound methods or the fluoroscopy groups. They were comparing the effectiveness of the deep cervical plexus block. So they quoted 2 studies, one by Elzau et al. And one by M. Anthony et al., which were supporting the effectiveness of these cervical joint injections or RMI blocks for the treatment of cervicogenic headache. And one of the study which was contradicting the effectiveness of these blocks was given by M.E. Goldberg et al. And what they have mentioned in the discussion is that the reason for this contradicting results maybe because in the Goldberg study, what they have included is the patients which have had headache for at least 3 to 4 years, while in our current study, the mean duration of symptoms was 5 to 10 months. So that is one of the things that they got, the different thing that they got. Now, ultrasonography, what they have written in discussion is from the results that they got, that ultrasonography may be a viable alternative to fluoroscopy or a computer tomography as a guidance method because it overcomes the disadvantages of radiation exposure and poor vascular display. Furthermore, the device of ultrasonography is portable and convenient to be used at bedside for patients with severe pain. One more thing that they have mentioned is that C2 and C3 transverse process block technique is a modification of the deep cervical plexus block that has been utilized to provide anesthesia to the head and neck region. Now, there were some internal limitations which the authors accepted. These was that the sample size was small and thus clinical findings still need to be confirmed with larger clinical trials. And this study was not a double-blinded control study, so it was difficult to conduct a double-blind control study with a non-traditional modality such as ultrasound or fluoroscopy. Now, the strengths of this study is that the study was conducted at a single center, that is the pain center of San Yat-sen Memorial Hospital, and the procedures were performed by the same doctors. So, USG guided procedures were conducted by H. Yang and Chow Ma, and fluoroscopy guided procedure were conducted by Quing Van. Then the one more strength is that they accepted their inherent limitations. Now, pitfalls of this study is that first thing is that this is a single blinded study. So single blinded study has a chances of bias. That is one of the pitfalls. Second is that there is no mention of criteria for selection of patients for second injection. So they have just mentioned that some of the patients which the authors, which the physician thought that they could be benefited by the second injection, they were given second injection, but there was no mention of actual criteria, how much should be the NRS and all those things. Then there was no mention of any associated symptoms like nausea, visual disturbances, nasal congestion in the study. And the one pitfall that I've already mentioned is the selection of more females in the study, though groups were comparable. Methodology is not clear, that I've already told. Then C2 or C3, so 2 levels were used. Some were given at C2, some were given at C3 level. So anatomical variations between the patients may affect the results. Then there was no mention of reasons for the complications which some of the patients experienced. So these were, I think, were the pitfalls of this study. Thank you.
Okay, can you go to the second presentation? Then we can, meanwhile, we can take some questions if there are.
Yeah.
And I am happy to announce the participation of Dr. Ashu Jain, and he's here with us. Sir, please, can you start your video?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So yes, sir, we can see you, and we can hear you also now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you. So if you have any, sir, any inputs for the first paper we like to take, because there are no questions in the chat as of now, otherwise we'll move to the second one.
See, when I was going through this paper in the morning, they have not described how fluoroscopically
Yes,
they will be doing
yes,
this
yes.
procedure. So I
Yes.
used to do in AP view, not in lateral view. I think I'll ask for your input also. And that is a straightforward procedure. Just in AP view, go to the transverse process and hit there and just inject some dye and inject the drug, but I don't know how they have managed to do it in lateral position. So I'll ask your comments also. And definitely, if you are used to ultrasonography technique and you can identify correctly the level of C2, C3, then there is nothing like ultrasound. So the major limiting issue doing ultrasound technique will be the uh, just localization of C2 or C3 vertebra. I think that is the biggest point. If you are good enough in ultrasound and can pinpoint your level either C2 or C3, then I think ultrasound should always be preferred.
Yes, so I agree to both the points, and I think first thing was pointed out in the presentation only that they have not mentioned the methodology in detail, and it's very easy technique in fluoro. Otherwise, you just go and hit the transverse process, and there is no chance of any vascular issues also.
Yeah,
And
it is very easy. Just hit
yes,
the transverse process in AP and you can just go there. I don't
yes,
know how they are managing lateral view. I
yes.
couldn't understand.
Probably what I feel is that they have done in API, but they have also taken a lateral view to just but they have not published the AP view, which is the main. I
Yeah.
mean, so that is one thing.
Mm.
Second thing, I also agree with the this thing. Uh, the training of the individual, it is well documented, and it's always mentioned by our seniors, colleagues, everybody, that we should do the procedure with the technique in which we are expert, and not with probably which is the best one. So best technique can be anything, but if we don't know how to do it, and so then we may end up creating more troubles and complications.
We have
So
personally missed it many times, C2, C3. It is sometimes really become difficult to identify on ultrasonography per se. So what
yes,
we do, we just try to pinpoint with the fluoroscopy na, that we are on the same level and then we can go ahead. But till date, we are even not that confident that only ultrasonography will pinpoint C2. I don't think that is the limitation.
so I think actually what we do is we just use the Byford process of the C2, and we try to
Mm.
identify with this. But if there is some anatomical variation or something,
Yeah.
then it will become really difficult. And fortunately, in few cases we have been able to identify, but maybe in
But
some
you
cases,
tend to miss sometime
yeah.
this
So
C2. So
yes.
that is a
Okay, so there is one question which we will take and then move on to the next paper. So this question says that cervicogenic headache is due to the facet joint pain. Then deep cervical plexus block is validated, or a question. So I think
there are studies with superficial cervical block also in cervicogenic headache. Though we don't know the exact mechanism, but yes, there are reports and people claim. Though in my practice, I don't do this. I always go for C2, C3 facet block or median branch block. But yes, there is evidence in the literature. Uh, we don't know the exact mechanism how it works.
yes. So that was the reason we have chosen these studies, because if you just do a PubMed search on cervicogenic headache, so in free papers only, we get less than 20 papers overall.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is ironical, and that is the reason probably we our things are not very clear, and this is where we need to push the bar. So we need to do more research on this topic. Okay, so let's move to the next paper. Dr. Sanjog, please move to the next paper.
Okay, so our next article is a review article. It is the Chinese Association for Study of Pain. They published this an expert consensus on the cervicogenic headache, and the authors were Hong Zhou et al. And all the authors prepared and drafted a part of this of the Chinese version of the manuscript, while Hong Zhou and Baogan Peng drafted the English version of this manuscript, and it was published in Pain Research and Management, volume 2019. Now, how this consensus was done was the Chinese Association for Study of Pain actually organized a meeting of pain management experts, which included neurologists, orthopedists, and headache specialists. And suggestions were also proposed for consideration by headache specialists from other countries. And all the suggestions were taken. And this article reflects the resulting expert consensus on the diagnosis and treatment of cervicogenic headache in China. Now, through the consensus, they have given a definition of cervicogenic headache. So it is defined as any headache which is caused by disorder of cervical spine or its components such as bone, disc, and or soft tissue elements, usually but not invariably accompanied by neck pain. This is also the International Headache Society definition, which was given in 2013. The prevalence we have already mentioned in the previous article was 1 to 4%. Now, the diagnostic criteria, what they have accepted is given by the International Classification of Headache Disorders. And it is the diagnostic criteria includes the clinical laboratory and or imaging evidence of disorder or lesion within the cervical spine or soft tissues of the neck that can cause headache. Then evidence of causation demonstrated by at least 2 of the following findings. Headache that is developed in temporal relation to the onset of cervical disorder. Headache that has significantly improved or resolved along with improvement in or resolution of the cervical disorder. Cervical range of motion is reduced and headache is significantly aggravated by provocative maneuvers, or headache disappears after diagnostic block to the suspected cervical spine structure or its supplying nerve. So at least 2 of the following findings should be there. And it cannot be accounted by, cervicogenic headache cannot be accounted by any other ICHD3 diagnosis criteria. So in etiology, what they have given is that there is the anatomical anatomy and the pathophysiology of cervicogenic headache. So they have mentioned they have upper cervical nerve, that is C1, C2, C3. They are thought to be the main anatomical basis of the cervicogenic headache. So lesions anywhere in the atlanto-occipital joint, atlanto-axial joint, C2, C3 zygapophaseal joint, and intervertebral discs at these levels, they can produce cervicogenic headache. Now in pathophysiology, what they have said is there is basically the anatomical convergence of pain fibers from trigeminal and upper 3 cervical nerves. So there is a connection between this trigeminal nerve and the C2, C1, C2, C3 nerves, because of which any pain, any pathology which is there in the upper cervical region can get a referred pain in which goes into the distribution of the trigeminal nerve, that is the producing this. Now the symptoms, what they have described is which can lead to the diagnosis of cervicogenic headache is the patient may have chronic unilateral headache. They have written that it is generally a side locked headache. Now pain is first noted in the neck or occipital region before it radiates to the ipsilateral, frontotemporal, and orbital regions. Temporal regions are the most commonly affected. Now the character of pain can be deep, blunt, distending and tense pain without pulsations, which gets aggravated by neck movements, fatigue, or an unhealthy neck position and relieved by rest. It can be intermittent, it can be persistent. There can be concomitant symptoms like nausea, tinnitus, dizziness, phonophobia, photophobia, blurred vision, or disordered sleep. On examination, there can be limited investigations which can be done for these patients includes radiology, radiography, MRI, CT scans. But what they have given in the consensus is that these all investigations, they have limited value in the diagnosis of cervicogenic headache. In differential diagnosis, they have classified as primary headaches, which can be tension type headaches, cluster headaches, migraine, and secondary headaches, which can be due to increased intracranial pressures, SOLs, trauma, or any other drug-induced overuse headaches, or any secondary headaches. Now in treatment, the consensus is that we have to start the treatment with the use of pharmacotherapy, but there is a lack of convincing clinical studies which show effective efficacy of these drugs in the management of cervicogenic headache. But the common groups of drugs which can be used are NSAIDs, muscle relaxants, antidepressants, and anticonvulsants. Then they have described, they have given joint injection whenever the patient is having suboccipital or occipital pain, which is aggravated by cervical rotation. So lateral or posterior approach can be used, and 1 ml of volume is sufficient for the study. And they have quoted one study done by SN Narauz et al., the results of which were that after 3 months, 20% of the patients who were given these atlantoaxial joint injections had more than 50% relief. Now, next injection that can be given is C2C3 zygapophyseal joint injection in the patients with upper neck pain, which is spreading to the occipital region, or pain that increases when the neck is rotated or back is stretched. Now, the therapeutic efficacy of C2C3 intraarticular injection remains controversial according to the consensus. The next is cervical spine nerve root blocks. Now, what they have written in the consensus is that the effectiveness of these cervical nerve root blocks is 70%, with 50% still reporting relief after. So, the study which was done by LCG Person et al. In that study, the result was that even after 12 months, 50% of the patients still reported relief from the cervicogenic headache. Now, third, occipital nerve block and occipital nerve blocks can be used as diagnostic blocks to predict the efficacy of the radiofrequency treatment if planned in future. Then minimal invasive interventional management procedures included the radiofrequency thermocoagulation and pulse radiofrequency. Now, radiofrequency intervention is recommended for patients with intractable cervical headache from C2, C3 zygapophyseal joints, for which conservative treatment has failed and complete relief has been obtained from the diagnostic nerve blocks. So they have a conservative treatment has failed, diagnostic blocks is showing the efficacy, and this can be followed by the radiofrequency interventions. Now, pulse radiofrequency, according to this article, it has a short-term efficacy with recurrence during the long-term follow-ups, and it requires repeated treatments. They have given 2-3 lines about ozone, and they have said that it has a strong anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects, and it can show benefit in patients whom steroids are contraindicated. Then the clinical effectiveness of percutaneous radiofrequency ablation combined with ozone is superior to that of the percutaneous radiofrequency ablation done alone in the treatment of cervical disc herniation, providing a better medium and long-term outcome. So we can combine this ozone with percutaneous radiofrequency ablation. Surgical procedures, they have said that it is useful and beneficial only in 3 specific causes of cervicogenic headache. First is the C2 spinal nerve compression by vascular ligamentous structures, osteoarthritis of the lateral atlantoaxial joint, or upper cervical intervertebral disc pathology. Now, physical therapy, what they have said is that it is universally available, it is risk-free and has enormous benefits, and it should be the first choice for treatment with treatment of patients with cervicogenic headache. So treatment should start with this physical therapy and pharmacotherapy. And the manipulations that can be used are pulling, relaxation, chiropractic, specific training therapy, load endurance muscle exercise focusing on the neck and the shoulder joints or the upper limbs. So pitfalls is that they did not provide a structured protocol for management. So they mentioned about different things that can be done, but they have not given us a stepwise protocol for management of patients of cervicogenic headache. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think this was also a comprehensive coverage of different techniques which are used. So first I'd like to ask Dr. Ashu, sir.
I have some very important inputs for C2, C3. It is my favorite topic, as you know. So I'll ask the fellows, are they familiar or they are clear with this convergence of C1, C2, C3 with the trigeminal nucleus? Do they understand clearly what does it mean, or I should explain to you?
Sir, you can explain, sir.
So then please go to that diagram. Yes, this, yeah. So can we go full screen? Yeah.
Full screen. Yeah.
Now, important part to remember for all of us, the trigeminal nucleus has got a spinal nucleus, spinal part, which goes down maybe up to C4. And this nucleus is lying adjacent to the nucleus for these C1, C2, C3 nerves. So this is very important to understand. And from this spinal nucleus, you can see there is a mention, you have not mentioned this thing. This is a very important thing to remember. There is a trigeminothalamic tract. From this spinal nucleus, this tract will ascend to the thalamus like any other sensory track, and only then we will be able to differentiate sensory and painful stimulus. Now it has to go to ultimately thalamus. So this is, and first order neuron is this trigeminal ganglion, which is a pseudo unipolar ganglion, and this is the first order sensory neuron. Second order is from this nucleus, and third order is going up to the thalamus. So this is how this track is completed, and this spinal nucleus of trigeminal is now getting from this one C2 C3. So if we go to the diagnosis of and management of C1 C2 C2 C3, it is not beyond C3 at all. So any condition which is below C3, like C4 C5 disc or C5 facets and whatever, it is not going to cause headache. The most important nerve root which will cause a headache, cervicogenic headache, particularly coming to the orbit or temporal area or angle of the jaw, V1 V2 area, this is being from C1 to C3 only. So any pathology below that will not go there. So this is how this track works. And we have done many patients which have come to us from C1, C2 and V1, V2, and there is a problem at the back, and you do C2, C3, the trigeminal pain goes. So any patient who is coming to your clinic for trigeminal, particularly V1, you should always go and press C2, C3 and look for this C2, C3 headache, because it can be very well this kind of headache that we are talking of. This is one important point. Secondly, if we go to the procedure, now I don't think, and I'll ask Siddharth also, the intra-articular C2, C3, C4, C3, C4 or atlantoaxial maybe, which is very risky. I'm afraid of doing this atlantoaxial. Yes, intraoral. So God save us. We are not that competent. But I tell you, in all my patients, we do C2, C3, C2, C3, C4 median branch block, and the pain goes. So there is no point of injecting anything into the joint, facet joint, or doing DRG and doing all those kind of funny stuff. I can assure you, if you have very nicely injected C2, C3 median branch, this is done. And your all patient will have up to 80% pain relief and go for RFA. This is second point. Third point, as is mentioned for PRF versus conventional radiofrequency ablation. So last 2 year minimum, we are doing only pulse RFA in these patients, but the duration of pulse RFA is 2 to 10 minutes, and we are getting wonderful results. So probably, practically, we have abandoned doing conventional radio frequency ablation in all these patients, and I don't agree that the results are too small. They are just over a couple of months, and they are very good results. Thirdly, in physical therapy, again, I'll defer for C2, C3 that manipulations and all this is going to work. The most important point is posture correction. So all my patients, particularly the young patients, correct their posture, give them some muscle relaxant and some this gabapentinoids and some painkiller anti-inflammatory for 7 to 10 days and slightly longer this muscle relaxation, their pain will go. 80% patient will respond to posture correction, and there is no need of doing extensive chiropractic. This is important in lower cervical, not in C2, C3, that your pain will go with the manipulations and all this, because if you go into the pathogenesis of C2, C3, all these lower disc and below C3, they have no role in C2, C3. So this will be my input for this. Siddharth.
Yes, thank you, sir. And I'm sure you must be doing diagnostic blocks before.
Yes, all. Without diagnostic, you can't do that. So yes. This is what the exactly point is. If you get a patient, you are convinced that it is a cervicogenic headache, go and do C2, C3, facet median branch block or facet, not intra-articular. Do median branch block, third occipital nerve block that we call it as, and you look for your response. Within 10 minutes of injecting, you no need to inject steroid, just inject local there. Within 10 minutes of injecting your local, the pain goes. Okay, and that gives a lot of reassurance and a lot of confidence to the patient. मेरे पास एक लेडी 22.5 years से सर्वाइकोजेनिक हेडेक से आई थी, और हमने एक सिंगल ब्लॉक दिया और उसने कहा कि बस यही था, मेरी जिंदगी खराब हो गई इसकी वजह से. द काइंड ऑफ कॉन्फिडेंस पेशेंट है. And then it is more, I'll always tell all my fellows, these RFAs and whatever we do has a huge placebo effect. So once you have relieved her from her pain and you go and do PRF, the chapter is closed.
Yes, so I think that way it could be good. Sir, when you were speaking about PRF, your voice got a little scrambled. So can you repeat your protocol? I think you do for a longer period of time.
Yes. So we will do by end-on technique, not by this sidewise, because we don't need to keep our needle parallel. Now we go pinpoint parallel, perpendicular to the nerve, and do PRF for 10 minutes in all the patients at 42 degree. And I can tell you, if you do it longer, results are very good. And in the most important point, in all my patients where we are doing PRF for 10 minutes, the sensory stimulation comes below 0.5 for sure. But I will be happy if my sensory stimulation is coming at 0.2, 0.3 rather than 0.5. So you have to be precision with your placement of the needle. That should be close to the nerve. And once you are sure that your sensory stimulation is coming at 0.2, 0.3, maybe 0.4, and your motor stimulation is coming again around 0.5, that means you are on the nerve and your PRF will work. And you will use 10, 5 wala cannula rather than 10, 10 or something, anything else.
So do we need to repeat these PRF procedures in the patients? Like
in the I have repeated in almost 20-25% of the patient, but those were the patient who have not corrected their posture, who have not taken our words of exercise seriously. But anyway, it will help the patient up to maybe 1 year. 6 months to 1 year is a good time. But in all our such interventions, first always ensure that your patient will do exercise, your patient will do posture correction. So I will do the diagnostic block only after 2 weeks of the first visit, when I feel that patient has started doing exercise and done posture correction. Otherwise, whatever you do, it doesn't work.
Okay, great. So there is a question on this same topic, and they're asking whether you do the PRF immediately after, which is what you do, I think, or we do after if the pain comes back.
No, if the patient is from the area where they can come in my follow-up. Now, this is a very important point. If they are from the nearby area, like half of 40-50% of my practice is from overseas patient. So in all overseas patients who have come for treatment, we go diagnostic block. Next day I'll do PRF. Don't mug up my mind, because they can't come back again. But for all Indian patients who can come up for my follow-up, I can tell you with great responsibility, 30% of the patient will never require PRF. It is such a wonderful, the only thing is, once you do this block, they get a lot of assurance, they could get a lot of confidence, and probably it breaks their cycle of chronic pain. So all Indian patient, I'll only do PRF if pain comes back, who are in my follow-up. Now, if somebody is coming from far off places, then it's a separate issue.
So in my practice, what I do is RF never after, if I'm very sure that, the pain is because of the facet or, this thing. So I will do the RF in the first sitting. However, if, the patient is affording and they can come back, because most of my practice is in charity setup. So patient will not get to enter the OT again, mostly.
Okay.
So this is one, but however, it is recommended that you should do an RF only after the diagnostic block, and also the most of the patient which we do in other setups like corporate hospitals. So there, what we do is we tell the patient, explain where they can understand. Like a farmer may not be able to understand that, you are going to do once and then again he has to come and then again he has to undergo the procedure, and then again all the cost is same, plus he has to pay some 50,000 extra or 30,000 extra for that neck pain, and he's going to carry the gunny bag on his head the next day. So I think in those situations it becomes a little difficult. But that's what I'm trying to say, that there is no studies for this, so there is no literature for this. And this is that's why we took this topic, that this is an area wherein we can do a lot of good work. And if
No,
any of
my
the
experience last 6-7 years now, for Indian patient, we will never go RFA next day. And my patients are so happy. मेरे पास ऐसे ऐसे भी कुछ 2 पेशेंट मैं आपको बता सकता हूँ. 22.5 year old वाली का मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ. इसका सिर्फ हमने ब्लॉक किया, and I never did RF because she never had pain again. Can you believe this? Such a powerful tools we have. So we will stick to our position if patient can come in our follow-up, and there are very few patients who will default. And I'm working in such a setup where probably I'm not dealing with very poor patients. Most of my patients can pay, or they have some methodology, either insurance or some panel. So I don't have that kind of problem being sitting in a corporate hospital. But for all Indian patients who can come again, who can visit regularly, and many of them will not require RFA. This is my experience over time now, and that is standard protocol.
Okay, so there is one more question which I will take the liberty to answer. Somebody is asking, Dr. Snehal is asking that do you advise physiotherapy immediately after the PRF, and how do you quantify the response for doing both in the same sitting? So my answer is clearly that immediately, not only after but before also, my patient is doing physiotherapy from the day they come to me. And unless if they cannot do the thing without the pain, so then that's an exception. But otherwise they are doing it from day one, so that the physiotherapist also is well versed with the patient, and he doesn't get a fresh patient after the procedure who is pain free suddenly. So I think physiotherapy is the most important part of our care, and it should not be ignored. Number two, there is no need to quantify the response, that whether it is relief from physiotherapy alone or whether it is relief from your RF. The ultimate aim is to give results to your patient and increase the chances of success. You can quantify, but then you should be doing a research. And if I don't think anybody is publishing. I haven't seen any paper. So I don't think there is any fun of trying to quantify whether physiotherapy has worked or whether your procedure has worked. So what is your take, Dr. Ashu? I think I gave my 2 cents.
Yeah. See, the Indian patient, they are not, most of them, they are not ready for any intervention in first go. If you talk to them, made some diagnosis, because they, for years together, you will agree, patients are not being diagnosed properly. This is the least diagnosed identity. Patients, they are in terrible condition, and people don't diagnose this C2, C3 or this cervicogenic headache. Now, so what we will do, we give them a choice. If they are reluctant, then I'll tell them that I'll take 4 weeks of physiotherapy plus medical management. If it gives you 50% pain relief, I'll stop there and then only, and you carry on. And if you don't benefit up to 50%, within a 4-week time, we will go for intervention. And you will surprised to know 80% of the patient who go on this protocol, they have relief with posture correction, medicine, and this physiotherapy. So today, when we were reading, my fellow was telling me, boss, you don't do it in 80% of the patient, you don't do. I said, yes, when patients are being treated by these small things only. And I have never gone for chiropractor or manipulations for C2, C3. Yes, for trapezius and all this, that's a separate game altogether. But for C2, C3, just 4 weeks trial is good enough, and 80% of the patient will recover.
Yes. So I think we can, so they're asking what is specifically in posture correction. So posture correction, you can do very well by, it's very clear cut, and it is very well quantified. So you just need to ask your physio to measure the. There are angles which they can measure, and they can
Yes.
put up in front of you, and easily you can see that it is not normal. So you take points. So external auditory meatus is one
Yes,
point.
yes, yes, yes.
Then so they measure the specific points, and then they make the angles between them, and then that's how they assess the posture. We'll have in Mumbai Pain School, we're going to have a posture session very soon. So just stay tuned. We will have a good session on this as well. Okay, so I think there are many questions, but we will go on to the next topic, and I will answer the questions in the chat box. And Ashu sir, if you can also answer, if you want to enter, please enter in the chat box. We'll go to the next two papers. Those are also very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So without further delay, I will like to introduce the second speaker for today, and this is Dr. Akhil Bhalla. He's MD in anesthesiology, and he's currently fellow in pain medicine at our D.Y. Patil University School of Medicine. So over to you, Akhil. Please proceed. Thank you. Okay. Meanwhile, Akhil is getting ready. Let me take up some answers, and I will just read out some answers from the chat. People have started asking some questions. Okay, posture I have answered. Okay, somebody has asked, is there a role of occipital nerve block in cervicogenic headache? So yes, definitely.
Yes.
But the thing is, which ones to try first is not sure. I mean, so you
So
can.
most of the people will try occipital nerve block first because it is not easy to do C2, C3. It takes a lot of effort and learning for doing that. But there is no harm. Yes, if you don't know C2, C3, go and do occipital nerve block. It has got good results, and a OPD based procedure, the most important. I'll do in many patients to convince them. Okay, just give me a sec and I'll inject something in occipital area, and patient will have a lot of faith in you. Yes, yeah, you have done wonders. So this is a good technique and can be done. Yes.
Dr. Akhil, are you ready? You can start your screen share, and we are just waiting for you. Dr. Sanjog, you can help him. Huh? Call him and help him if he requires. Okay, so let's go to another question. We have lots of it, and somebody saying how many diagnostic blocks we do.
Only
We
one.
do 2 or 3, or how many? Somebody
Only
saying
one.
do 3. So I think it doesn't improve further. Beyond a point, it will not improve. So please do only one diagnostic block. And in fact, they wanted to let go of one also, but it was not done because then the patients who were only better with the this
Blocks.
single injection of local anesthetic, so we would have denied those patients
Yes.
with this benefit. So I think this is clear. There was
Sir,
one
I'm
more.
audible now?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Yes. Very good. This is good, Akhil.
Yeah.
Continue. Because if there is no sound, we can't understand anything. It's
Yes.
all sound and vision.
Sir, it is audible now, sir?
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Please continue.
Sorry for the delay.
No problem.
This is
Please
the
continue.
third
Take your...
article for today.
You are
The
not an
importance
engineer.
of-
You are a doctor. It's okay. Continue, please.
The importance of craniovertebral angles and cervicomedullary angles in cervicogenic headache. The importance of craniovertebral angles and cervicomedullary angles. This was the original research done by Gökçe Koban, and it was published in the Turkish Society of Radiology in 2014. So the research question which this article asked was whether the narrowing of the craniovertebral angle and the cervicomedullary angle affects the 3 upper cervical canal nerves and the trigeminal nerve, causing cervicogenic headache via stretching and thereby causing pain. Cervicogenic headache is a referred pain from the cervical structure as documented that are innervated by the 3 upper cervical canal nerves. Pain is commonly seen originating due to the pathologies of the following joints: atlanto-occipital joint, atlanto-axial joint, zygapophyseal joint, intervertebral disc, and pathologies of the upper cervical spinal nerve. So the methodology adopted was, out of 4,122 patients of headache 205 patients were diagnosed with cervicogenic headache according to the International Headache Society diagnostic criteria and included in the study as the pain group, that is group B. 40 volunteers, healthy volunteers, were taken as control in a non-headache group, which was considered as group 0. For patients, the pain was evaluated using a 100 mm VAS score and categorized into 6 pain groups. The craniovertebral angles and the cervicomedullary angle values were measured on the sagittal T2 weighted MRI. The angles were the craniovertebral angle was constructed using a line, imaginary line along the clivus, extrapolating it inferiorly on the upper cervical spinal canal, whereas the angle between the two lines on the ventral side of the medulla oblongata and the upper cervical spinal cord constituted the craniomedullary angle. These are T2 weighted images of the mid sagittal section of an MRI. This line, which can be seen with the blue arrow, is the craniovertebral angle, and this line on the right side, shown with the red arrow, is the angle from the ventral portion of the medulla oblongata and the cervical spinal cord. So the methodology was that these angle values were measured by 2 radiologists who were each blinded to each other's studies. The radiologists were also blinded to the clinical findings of the patient. These angles were measured on 2 different occasions by each radiologist with a 4-week interval. Statistical analysis, compliance of the studies with the normal distribution of continuous variables was checked using the Shapiro-Wilk test. Leibniz test was used to analyze the homogeneity of the group variances. Correlations between the variables were evaluated using Spearman correlation coefficient. The reliability analysis was performed amongst the radiologists, and the intra-class correlation coefficients were calculated for consistency of these measurements. The SPSS software was used for analysis of the data set. A p-value of less than 0.05 was deemed as statistically significant. 245 subjects were included in the study, which included 155 females and 90 males. And there were 2 groups. The pain group, group P, consisted of 205 patients, which was 135 females and 70 males. The mean age of the group was 31.8 years. The non-headache control group was group 0, consisting of 40 healthy volunteers, out of which 20 were males and 20 were females, with the mean age of 31.2. The patients were divided into 5 groups according to the pain score. Mild pain group 1, 49 patients. Moderate pain group 2, 59 patients. Severe pain group 3, 52 patients, and very severe pain group 4, had 45 patients. There was no patient in the pain group 5, which was the most severe pain group, and the 6th group of the VAS score. So on the statistical analysis, there was found to be more than 97% agreement and statistically insignificant between the intra-observer and the intra-observer measurements. That is, the first reading and the second reading of the first radiologist and the second radiologist were taken at different, they were made to do the same measurement, and they were statistically significant. So there was no disagreement between the 2 radiologists as well as between their 2 measurements. Craniovertebral angles, the pain score, on the results, the pain scores increased with the decreasing CVA value. You can see as the pain scores increased, that is in group 2 and 3, which were the higher pain score values, the angles were decreasing. So as the pain scores increased, they were decreasing CVA values, and the difference was statistically significant. There was comparatively less, there was no difference in the CVA values between the control group, that is group 0, and group 1, but there was a significant difference between group 2, 3, and 4. Similarly, pain scores were also decreased with decreasing CMA values. The craniomedullary angle values, as they kept on decreasing, the pain kept on increasing. There was no difference in the CMA values between the group 2 and 3, whereas CMA values were different in the other pain groups as compared to the group 2 and 3. This was the Spearman correlation coefficient. The relationship between the craniomedullary angle and the craniovertebral angle and the cervicomedullary angle values, the pain scores were statistically significant for each group. That is, there was a negative correlation between the pain score versus the craniovertebral angle value. There was a negative correlation between the pain score versus the cervicomedullary angle value, but there was a positive correlation between the craniovertebral and the cervicomedullary angle value. The discussion with the authors was that the study showed that these angles, the narrowing effect of the angles, affects the occurrence of cervicogenic headache. The average craniomedullary angle, cervicomedullary angle, and the craniovertebral angle values in cervicogenic patients were significantly narrower than those in the control, and there was an inverse relationship between the pain score and the angle value. It is well documented that cervicogenic headache shows a female predominance, which was also observed in the study. Trauma is a predisposing factor to cervicogenic headache. So in this study, 12 patients had a history of head trauma, whereas no patient in the control group had suffered from neck trauma. The pathogenesis of cervicogenic headache is unclear and starts early in life, which is approximately 32 to 35 years. This was supported in our study as well. The mean age of the pain group was 31 years. So these are the mid-sagittal T2 weighted MRI sections. This is in a patient with a pain score of 0. So you can see that the angles, this is a normal T2 weighted MRI, where this is with a patient having a pain score of 3. So as you can see, it compared with the previous one, the angle is substantially decreased, and similarly, the angles are further decreased in a patient with a pain score of 4. The inherent limitations of this study, as accepted by the authors, was that the cervicogenic headache might not be due to just the neck lesions, as indicated in some studies. It would be inappropriate to focus only on the structural changes. There was insufficient number of subjects in the control group, which were 40. If the subjects number was close to that of the patient group, that is 165 patients, the author could have assigned cutoff values for the angles for the occurrence of pain. The strength of the study, this was the first study to investigate whether narrowing of the cervicomedullary angle and the craniovertebral angle value do affect the trigeminal nerve branches and the 3 upper cervical spinal canal nerve via their stretching and thereby causing pain. Pitfalls of the study was that the anatomical angles cannot be the only criteria to assess cervicogenic headache, and there were no clinical implications which were taken into consideration in the study related to the values and the clinical effects of it. Thank you.
Dr. Ashu sir, will you like to add something here? This is actually a radiological study, and I took it because, just to stimulate how interesting a small finding can be. And I think there are lots of other findings which are waiting to be discovered, only if we can just put in our brains to the task.
So first of all, thank you for introducing this study. Me and Rajat both have sometimes seen this, but mind will only register what you know. So today when I went through this, I said, yeah, come on, yeah. This we have noticed so many times, but we didn't know. So importance of such kind of study that you should change your practice. So I today only, after reading this, I have given instruction to my radiologist, blank instruction to all the patient. I'll put it on the paper, give me these angles, And the explanation that we were looking for why trigeminalis get so much of hyperalgesia and allodynia and C2 area and pressure hyperalgesia and all this, probably we can explain it this way. So I find it very useful. So let us see. We will use in our experience, and the message will be, if you read something new, you should adapt it into your clinical practice. Only then it is of use. Otherwise, it is like anything. So this is what we have done today. Today only I have given instruction to my radiologist. I have discussed with them, and in future all my patients, because before giving the block, I'm always asking for 1 MRI. That is a protocol, right? But never my radiologist has told me this thing. Never we could make out this. So now from today onwards, all the patient will have these angles and the answer for this.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I think the pitfalls and all were already highlighted well. And if they could have gone ahead and done normal 165 people who didn't have headache, they could have then
Yes.
predicted actually, and that would have been great help. That it was just it would have been a screening tool then. That okay, it's an
Yeah.
objective marker of the possible pain, states. So it could have been there, and this should have been of great help.
See, there are two very important points in this study. Number one, all the patient whose angle have gone down, become less, they are with severe pain, not with mild or moderate pain. So this is very one important point to note down. So it is not, if you see, not in group 1 and 2, it is on the later group where the pain severity is increasing. There the angle is going down, number one. Number two, they have very categorically said that if the angle is below 130, 134, below 134, it can predict cervical myelopathy. So we will see. So this is registered today. We will come out with our angles after say 6 months or 1 year. Let us see what it actually says.
Yes. Great. Okay, so Akhil, please move to the next slide.
Yes.
I think the next presentation can be taken up now. There are no more questions in the chat box. The attendees, please feel free to put up the questions. Dr. Ashu, there was one question. Meanwhile, Akhil puts up his slide. I'd like you to answer.
Yeah.
Somebody asked about the use of ozone. So I personally don't use ozone anywhere, but if it has to
And
be
that
used,
too in
I
a
feel
median branch block. I don't know.
yes. So it is beneficial only in whatever the studies are there and whatever people use. My colleagues, many of them, they use it, and I think they are using it only in either the disc or the joints. So
Yes.
I don't think in the vicinity of nerves, I don't think it is going to help. So
It
what
is
are
going to
your
help, and on the contrary, anything which is this kind of stuff, pro-inflammatory or something, I don't know what is the logic of injecting ozone near to the nerve. Secondly, I have yet to see a person even in joint or disc, they only inject ozone. Every person is injecting ozone with steroid. So what is working where, we don't know.
yes? So it's another question mark.
Yes.
So okay, so this combining of techniques is very different than combining physiotherapy and for example RF, because both of the treatments individually have proven to be of some benefit. However, the
Yes.
same is not true with the ozone, and I mean this should be taken care of. And if you have some different findings, so we will be very happy if you can publish them, and we will start using ozone the next.
Particularly ozone near to the nerves, I don't know.
Yeah, so that is, we will be very happy. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, ozone was mentioned, but they have not given the details. It was mentioned in the various techniques, one of the various techniques which are used.
Either they are injecting inside the joint or where they are doing.
Yes,
And
yes.
these has not
All
mentioned.
the things are to be if ozone, because it is supposed to be reducing inflammation and other things. So this first
This has to be inside the joint only.
it has to be somewhere where it can be enclosed, and this can be either in the joint or inside the disc. Okay, so now let's go to the second the last paper of today. So Dr. Akhil, please continue. Thank you.
Yes. So this is the fourth article for today. Combination of TENS, lidocaine injections, and muscle manipulation as a therapeutic method for cervicogenic headache, a pilot study. This was an original research by Pavlos Girnes in Medica, a journal of clinical medicine, published in 2019. The research question that the study asked was to determine if the three-step treatment is sufficient to improve cervicogenic headache symptoms, and if the administered pain medication could be reduced after a certain point of time. Introduction. Cervicogenic headache is a type of chronic headache which starts from the neck, extends to one or more points either in the facial area or in the area of the neocrinium or core. The most frequent symptomatology is the reduced mobility of the neck, particularly regarding neck rotation, neck pain in the upper third of the neck, the bilateral path of pain from the occipital to the parietal region, instability during walking, visual disturbances, unilateral high-frequency tinnitus, ear pain, dizziness, and occasional brief episodic vertigo. The treatment modalities include pharmaceutical, non-pharmaceutical, which includes physiotherapy, invasive modalities, or surgical modalities. This study combines three modalities, that is TENS, local muscular lidocaine injections, and cervical muscle movements to look for any improvements in cervicogenic headache patients. Methodology adopted was, it is a pilot study to evaluate the outcome of the three-step treatment. So first, transcutaneous electronic nerve stimulation was done for 15 minutes, followed by local intramuscular injection of lidocaine 2%, followed by muscle manipulations in the trapezoid region, in the upper cervical region, and the occipital vertebral region. The main study included 28 patients who had presented to the OPD, underwent a detailed medical history and clinical examination, and was sent for MRI to exclude any intervertebral disc myelopathy, vertebral stenosis, and tumors. Out of 28 patients, 20 patients were rejected. 12 of them had a spinal pathology, 7 had another type of headache, and 1 had a headache due to arterial hypertension. So therefore, only 8 patients were examined, which included 2 males and 6 females. The etiology is as shown. One male and 3 females had myofascial head and neck syndrome, and one of them had myofascial neck pain syndrome, and 1 male had a whiplash injury, whereas 2 females had stress disorder-induced cervicogenic headache. The VAS score was applied was applied before the 3-step therapy and 20 minutes after. The patients were observed for a 3-month period of treatment. The patients with cervicogenic headache indicated a pain intensity from 5 to 9 based on the VAS score. The technique followed was that neurostimulation using a TENS device was done for 15 minutes. This was applied in a single session only in except 2 cases where repeated sessions were given. The TENS device had an automatically changing rate lasting 15 minutes. So therefore, after 15 minutes, this was followed by intramuscular injections. Lidocaine 2% was used. The way in it was given was explained. The technique followed was, the access point for infiltration was marked as follows. An imaginary line was made connecting the spinous processes of the cervical vertebra, and 3 points were chosen on each side of the midline. The first point, the injections were given, infiltration was given from bottom to top. The first point was chosen 10 to 11 centimeters from the midline. That is 3 centimeters from the free rim of the trapezoid. 0.5 cc lidocaine 2% at a depth of 1 centimeter with a 5 cc 27G syringe was used. The same infiltration was given on the other side. The second point was chosen at 3 to 3.5 centimeters from the midline of the A6, A7 spinal, and 3 cc 25G syringe was used with a long needle. This was used to administer 1 cc of lidocaine at a depth of 3.5 cc, and during retraction of the syringe at 1 centimeter, again an injection of 0.5 cc was given. The third point was chosen at 3 centimeter lateral to the A3 spinous level. At this level, at a depth of 1.5 centimeter, with a 5 cc 25G syringe, lidocaine injection was given. So this study had prophylaxis contraindications as written. Maximum allowable dose of lidocaine was chosen as 22.9 mg per kg without vasoconstrictor. The patients stay in the clinic for 20 minutes after the last local infusion for follow-up. A good history of possible allergic reactions was taken. And any patient having anticoagulation therapy, the use of anticoagulant was temporarily discontinued and adjusted accordingly. So the result, the VAS score was taken before and 20 minutes after the 3-step therapy. They were significantly reduced 20 minutes after therapy. As you can see, the VAS scores were between 5 to 9 before therapy, whereas post therapy after 20 minutes, the scores were between 1 to 5. In all the 8 patients, shortly after this, it was done. They had reported significant improvement in pain. Feeling of instability was less during the 15-minute trial walk in the examination room post therapy. Tinnitus reduction was there. Feeling of lightness in the eye, forehead and back, as well as better rotation mobility of the head was noticed. This was a long-term results that they had noticed. The use of painkillers was noted as less than 2 times a week or more than 2 to 3 times a week. There was significant reduction till at least 2 weeks after therapy, whereas it was more or less the same after 1 month and 3 months after therapy. The length of time between the last infiltration of local anesthetic and the onset of symptoms decline was noted. This was ranging to 5 to 10 minutes. There were 2 cases of cervicogenic headache where there was a feeling of instant rotational vertigo. In these cases, there were 3 additional sessions were performed. The final outcome of the tinnitus after those 4 sessions was that they decreased to about 1/3 of the intensity of that first case when they first showed, and they were showing moderate improvement in the second case. In one case of cervicogenic headache, deep orbital pain was reported on the right side. Here, the third upper cervical snap point was about 1 centimeter lateral to the original design, and the infiltration wasn't given at the right point in this one case. Discussion. Treatment of cervicogenic headache is multifactorial. One of these methods is injection of lidocaine, which is increasingly used in clinical practice. TENS stimulates the inhibition of intraneurons in the substantia gelatinosa in the posterior horn of the spinal cord, and particularly large diameter fibers, that is A beta, which inhibits the transmission of stimuli by small diameter fibers. A non-invasive technique, that is muscle manipulation, they induce inhibitory neurons, whereas as well as inhibitory areas in the gray matter of the mesencephalus, thereby reducing sensation of the pain. So the inherent limitations which were accepted by the authors was this was a pilot study which was used for a peer-to-peer outcome. A larger sample size would be needed, including a multi-center study, which would be more useful. Pain frequency wasn't noted. Rather, the use of analgesics or painkillers was noted and used as a guide for the same. Strength of the study. The pilot study is always done before starting the main study to address the difficulties in methodology, and hence it was done. There are very few RCTs on this topic, so this was a bold attempt on trying to do that. Pitfalls of the study. Standardization of the method wasn't appropriate. 8 patients for a pilot study with multiple arms is insufficient. All the literature is limited. A more detailed review of the literature is warranted. It is well documented that multiple trigger point injections may be needed for the relief of pain. Therefore, the author should have taken this into consideration and planned accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Akhil. So now I think we took this study because it has, no matter whether you are doing it or not, but your patient is getting his TENS and everything done. And, in some countries or in some setups, the doctors combine the treatments. However, in our country, the patient combines all the treatments. Okay. So it's going to one Ayurveda guy, one, some homeopath guy, then one physiotherapist, then one pain physician, 1, 2 or 3 orthopedicians, and likewise, and maybe one neurologist also. So I think, fortunately or unfortunately, there are very few studies which give the outcome analysis of a combination approach. So this was one of them, and mind it, we had to choose a free paper, means which is freely available to access, so that we don't have any copyright issues. So I think this is one of those studies chosen with that thing in mind, and it had lots and lots of limitations, and even this was published. So you can very well imagine what if you do your study and you accept your limitations, still it is some improvement over the non-existent literature. So over to you, Dr. Ashu sir, for your comments.
So there are a couple of important takeaway points from this study. Number 1, tinnitus and vertigo and ear pain are very important part of cervicogenic headache. So if patients of cervicogenic headache are complaining for these symptoms also, you should not hesitate to treat them. Or if your ENT colleagues, this study was primarily done in ENT OPD, I think. The patient was picked up from ENT OPD itself. So you can see you can tell your ENT colleagues that patients with tinnitus, vertigo, or ear pain probably can have cervicogenic headache and give us a chance. So this is one important point. Again, we have noted this point very loudly. It has to be. Second point, if we look at the points where the injections were given, I have done certified course of acupuncture. these are the same point that we were told to do TENS or acupuncture or all those points for cervicogenic headache. So more or less they correspond with those points. Number two. Number three, particularly when you are doing injection at the back of the neck, either at C3 level, particularly the upper point one, your needle should not be more than ½ inch length. Always remember this, because if it is 1 inch length, you can very well go inside the spine and inject your drug in vertebral artery, in canal, and you can do anything to your patients. So like if I do acupuncture in these patients, I do a lot of dry needling and trigger points release and with very successful outcome. So I have a lot of experience with these points at least. So never ever use a needle when you are going into a spine area which is more than ½ inch length. Okay, so always be careful, because ½ inch length, that means 1.25 centimeters around. So if you see needles come in 1 inch, ½ inch, they don't come in 1.5 centimeters. And with 1 inch, you tend to make mistake. So always use ½ inch needle, which is good enough to do either injection or acupuncture, whatever you want to do in this area. This is again very important. Thirdly, in this study, they have not tell, like we do trigger point release in many patients. We call them every 3 to 5 days for a couple of sitting, maybe 2 sitting, 3 sitting, 4 sitting, and they get relief after second sitting or third sitting, like that. They have not mentioned that how many injections they have done and at what gap they have done. So there is a complete silence about this, and life is not that easy that they have shown. I can tell you with my experience that you inject lignocaine at 5 places and patient will not come back to you. This is absolutely false. I don't agree. Siddharth will comment on this. Life is not that easy. So it has to be multiple times and at regular intervals. And people in this study only, they have compared with IV lignocaine. Again, these are certain things, studies which are under evaluation. We don't have any definitive answers for this. But definitely life is not that easy that you inject lignocaine and you get away with cervicogenic headache. It is not that, that is not going to happen. So how many injection and what gap, and then duration of follow-up, this is important. So this will be my input for this paper at least.
Great. So I think I agree with whatever you have said, sir. The only thing which I will like to emphasize here, in addition to what has already been said, is that you can see that these patients, they are coming at regular intervals, and whether you I mean, this is without any you can say forced behavior or without any forcing on your part. So the patient will give you initial few chances, and if you can in those chances explain to them the importance of a shared decision making and a therapeutic alliance, then patient is your partner. Okay.
Yeah.
So in most chronic pain conditions, if you can do this much, then the patient will keep on coming to you and keep on getting treated even for longer period of times, and they will experience pain-free intervals. So you are just acting as a painkiller drug without any side effects. Means their kidneys are not getting affected, their systems are not getting affected. They come to you and then they are pain-free for certain intervals, and these intervals you are making maximum efforts to prolong these intervals. And the patient starts having hope, and you then also start knowing more and more about these conditions. Pain is such a vast topic that 90% of the doctors are treating pain only. Okay. And that is the reason why you find it very difficult to get your patients just by this pain name, because most of the people are treating pain only. However, if you can do this much, then you will not only keep on learning and expanding in your area of expertise, but you will have extra knowledge than most of your colleagues, and this can benefit your patients. And after a while, this word will spread, and you will be like a magician to most of these patients. So I think this is the another message with this study, that just imagine they are putting those three dots and, meticulous. Just imagine how much time they have given to that one patient. And,
No,
I think,
Siddharth, I tell you, I used to do a lot of acupuncture, still do a lot of dry needling. Once you start doing, it takes a minute. Then you know what is 3 centimeters. Just put 2 fingers and you do that either side of the midline. You start doing the things, it will become easy.
of course. But still, as compared to a 2 minutes, like I still remember my physician's OPD. So, the OPD was one guy is lying on the bed, one guy is sitting on the stool, one guy is, just at the door willing to enter. One guy. So I also follow the same approach when I'm doing a very high OPD, and like I have to see 80 patients in say 3 hours or 4 hours. And we have a protocol which we follow, and we are able to manage pretty well. But that's not the ideal thing to do, and of course it should not be propagated unless you have such a high workload and you are dealing with such high work pressures.
Yeah.
Like there is Dr. Naveen Malhotra at Rohtak. He sees I think maybe 400 patients in one day.
I know.
When
I used to go to Meerut,
Yes.
first day I had anuria till 4 o'clock, 200 patients, and I laughed with Anurag here. It is very difficult.
Yes. So, I mean, this thing is also one of the messages which I carry
Yes.
from this paper.
Exactly. Yes.
And okay, so let's take some questions. Thank you for the valuable insights. Thank you, Akhil, for the concise and clear presentation. Much appreciated. And thank you, Ashu sir, for your valuable inputs. Now let's take some questions and then we'll end this session. So there's a question which was put earlier also, and I just missed it probably. So Dr. Varalika Sharma is asking how to differentiate cervicogenic headache and vestibular migraine. So I think this is one of the questions.
Always remember one thing. The cervicogenic headache will increase by neck movement, by posture, by pressing on C2, C3, the pressure hyperalgesia is there. So if your headache is correlating to your neck movement and your posture and C2, C3 pressure, only then it is cervicogenic headache. None of the migraine will be aggravated by these maneuvers. This is my take on this.
Yes. So I think cervicogenic headache is probably very clearly, diagnosed in a pain-filled OPD, not otherwise, because we are looking for it only. Because we are expert in dealing with this, and we are looking for this only. So every patient who comes to me with a diagnosis of migraine, I first presume this is a cervicogenic headache unless proved otherwise.
Otherwise, yes.
So this is just probably what we do, and most of the times we are correct. And vestibular migraine is a type of migraine, and it's not a type
Yes.
of so it's unilateral with aura. And when you call it vestibular migraine, they many times will not have headache only. Okay, the main symptoms are the dizziness or the vertigo. So you stationary and the surroundings will be moving. Okay, so this is what has to be understood. And this can also, if the same symptoms they occur in children, so it is known as this benign paroxysmal vertigo of childhood. And these are the patients who will then, when they grow up, they will have higher chances of having migraine. And if you have this, so you may feel imbalanced, then lightheadedness, or you are rocking a boat, or nausea, vomiting. So it's more towards migraine, you can say. And the diagnosis, taking a diagnosis is not easy. So you must, and there are specific triggers. Like migraines have triggers. Cervicogenic headache will not have that kind of triggers. So the triggers for cervicogenic headache will be overuse, looking down,
bad posture,
activity, yes, bad posture, and that's why your these muscular injections will work, because when you are doing your facet joint injection also, you are injecting some drug in the muscle, surrounding muscle as well. Okay, and that's how you go about it. And the treatment, the diagnosis, everything is totally different, and you will easily recognize based on these symptoms. However, it is important to involve your neurologist, make your neurologist your friend, and you can work as a team, and don't get scared. And of course, he will never be scared from you, but you also don't get scared from him. In fact, he's your one of the best friends for diagnosing all headache cases, and they are also tired up of getting the same patient of headache again and again, putting it that naproxen and everything again and again, and if there is even one solution, they'll be very happy to get the patient treated, especially the younger generation. They're very, very positive. This is what I find. So I think we have answered this question as well. So if there are any more questions, we'd like to take them now. I had put in the poll. I think if anyone can, you guys can just put up the poll responses and just answer these simple questions, which will help us improve and also set up the future topics for us. I think you can see this on your screen now. And once we are done with this, we will just let me put up my slide in the meanwhile. So this is my second last slide. So we already had a good discussion. So somebody says that it's not, you need not ask, you should just know. And the secret of getting things done is to act. So please join in the courses, join our mailing list. And our basic pain course is online. The registrations will close in 3 days or 4 days. 30th September is the last date. And right now it's free. The next version will be priced. So I think that will be beneficial for you if you just register for this. We have the WhatsApp group link, which is already there in the chat. Please join our WhatsApp group. Follow us on various social media platforms. And I think I'll just stop sharing. And thank you for attending today. We have got lots of votes, and thank you for this response. And thank you for also sharing what kind of topics you guys want to see. And we'll be very happy to bring in these topics for you in future. And before we end, special thanks to Dr. Ashu Jain. And
thank you.
Be of great value to us in headaches. Because I've seen some of his phenomenal work, which he does at Artemis Hospital in Gurgaon. And whenever you can, just call him and visit him. I think you'll learn a lot. And thank you to our fellows who have put up the presentation. And Dr. Ashu would like to say something, or we'll just end the.
Yeah, we have opportunity to change our practice from today's paper. So this is how you grow in your career. Always pick up the things that you have seen.
Yes, so we will,
thank you, Siddharth, for sending me this good paper.
So we'll keep on doing this sessions every week. So hopefully we'll bring up new papers every time and new interesting topics as well. So thank you all for attending. I'll now end the meeting. Have a good night.
Thank you, dear. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us. Thank you.